topic of this video is finding linear regression equations, aka lines of best fit. Let's take a look at example 1. Find the linear regression equation for Ravi's scatter plot. Round the slope and y-intercept to the nearest hundredth. The points are given here. If you remember from our previous lesson, Ravi wanted to see if there was a relationship between a person's monthly income and how much money they spend on clothing each month. He noticed that there was a positive trend. Now, in mathematics, we like to create equations in order to model relationships when we have specific trends occurring. If we look at this data, we can see that it is quite linear, right? It's not going to be perfect, but what we're going to try to do is create an equation that would approximately model the scatter plot data. The first thing we need to do is to create a table of values. So we're going to look, and we notice here that monthly income is our X variable. So I'm going to put that first in the table. And we can see here that on our y-axis, we have monthly clothing expense. So I'm going to put that for my second column in my table. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to take each of the values from each of the points, and we're going to list them in the correct column. So here I see $205 for the monthly income, and then $36 for the clothing expense. The next coordinate, I see $242 for the monthly income, and $45 for the monthly clothing expense. And then I'm going to do that for each of the points. So all I'm doing is copying those numbers and putting them into the table. And then do take care to make sure you're typing them in correctly. Otherwise, it's going to create issues for you later on. 355, 82, and then 380 and 84. Okay. Now, once I have my table of values, first I'm going to do just a quick formatting just because I'm picky about how it looks. So I'm going to center everything, and I'm going to put some borders around that table. Now, we've done this part before, so this part's relatively easy, but let me show it one more time. So in order to create a scatter plot like this here, first thing we need to do is highlight the table. So step 1, highlight the table. The next thing is we need to go to Insert. So we have File, Home, Insert. Once I'm in Insert, I'm going to find the section that says Charts. I'm going to choose the one that says Insert Scatter Plot. And I'm going to choose the first option. Okay? Now, you will notice that these are the same, and that's good, right? Because these points are here, and these points were from this table. So same graph, so we're good. Now, that's a scatter plot. That does not answer this question. This question says, find a linear regression equation. So what we want to do is we want to find a line that closely approximates this data. In order to do that, we're going to pick any point on this scatter plot. Pick your favorite one, right-click it. When you right-click it, a menu will appear. Okay, so then you will right-click, like I said, and this menu will appear. Click where it says Add Trend Line, and then a line of best fit will appear. You'll see that. Sorry, let me move this over. You'll see that appear right through those points. And so as you notice that this line will approximate the data. Now, the cool thing about doing your line of best fit using technology rather than by hand is in Excel, they use something called linear regression tools. And these linear regression tools will allow you to get the exact perfect line of best fit, right? So that the distance between any of these points is minimized as much as possible from the line, right? Now, once you have this line, this box over here appears, right, when you have that line. And then you see some options. We want it to be linear, right? And then we want it to show the equation because we actually want to know what the equation of this line is. So we're going to check the box that says display equation. Okay? There's my equation. I'm going to select that box and just make the font size just a little bit larger because it comes out kind of small. Now, I'm almost there. So the question does say, write an equation. There's the equation. And then it says round the slope and y-intercept to the nearest hundredth. Excel can actually do that for us. If we click here on label options, we can tell it to not be general, but to tell it to be currency, so money. And we want it to round to 2 decimal places. That's the hundredth place. And there it goes. All right, so now that we have this one finished, I want you to try one. So find the linear regression equation for the scatter plot defined by these points. Now remember the steps. Step 1, make a table. Step 2, highlight that table. Step 3, insert scatter plot. Step 4, right-click the data, add trend line. And step 5, display the equation. Give it a try. All right, let's take a look at example 2. In example 2, I want you to interpret the slope as a rate for Ravi's linear regression equation. So if we remember correctly from our warm-up, we know that the slope is actually going to be the number in front of the x. So we know that in this case, our slope is that 0.29. Now, the question is, what does that mean? What does that represent in this context, right? So we know, first off, I'm just going to write on here for us. We know that this number here is the slope, right? And we know that slope is a rise over a run, also known as a change in y values, right, the up and down, over a change in x, the left and right. So we know here that our slope is 0.29. Now some of you are probably saying, but Ms. Curtis, that's not a fraction. Well, we can write it as a fraction. So let's say that 0.29 is actually 29 hundredths, right? So like 29 cents out of $1, right? These two mathematically mean the same thing. So now what does this mean in terms of this problem? Remember, the numerator, right, is going to be the change in y. So we need to look at what y actually represents. If we look at our graph, we can see that y is the monthly clothing expense. So this $29 is the change in monthly clothing expense. And we know that the bottom number is the change in x. Well, we know that this is our x-axis, so that's the change in monthly income. So we could then make a statement like this. So we know this is our change in, let's say, clothing expense. And we know that this is our change in income. So we could then make a statement to the effect of, for every $100 increase, every $100 increase in income, Ravi can spend $29 more on clothing. Let's take a look at example 3. Example 3. Ravi wants to determine an appropriate monthly amount to budget for his own clothing based on the analysis of the data. He works 2 part-time jobs and gets a small allowance from his parents. His total income is $420 per month. What is a reasonable amount for his clothing expense? So the first thing we need to recognize is his analysis of the data created an equation, right? So we have this equation for Ravi and this data. Now we need to remember what each variable represents. Now remember, y is our monthly clothing expense. So that's in the equation. And x is the monthly income. Now in this problem, they tell us his monthly income. So they're telling us x. and they want to know what is a reasonable amount for his clothing expense. They want us to find the amount for the clothing expense, which in this case is y. So what we're going to do is we're going to take x and we're going to substitute it into the equation for x. So that's going to give us y equals 0.29 times 420 minus 22 and 2 cents. We're going to use our calculators and multiply. .29 times 420, and then we're going to subtract. Let's make sure I did that correctly because that looks funny. 0.29 times 420, and then we're going to subtract the $22.02. Okay, and that gives us $99.78. And that's what we have. So we could then say, based on the data Ravi collected, it would be reasonable to assume an expense of about $100 for clothing each month. Now, obviously, his answer did not come out exactly $100, but we're okay with that because it's quite close. Now it's your turn to practice. You're going to go into Canvas, find the assignment titled Linear Regression with Excel. Begin the assignment, reach out if you have